see the light inside you, brighter than the skies. Hold on, just let us escape and fly away tonight.
In the last video, wherein I explained in depth the meaning of the wayside heart in the parable of the sower, I had highlighted the need for us to keep reorienting ourselves in the Lord throughout the day. Now, one of the reasons why this is so important is to fulfill Philippians chapter 2 verse 15, that ye may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God, without rebuke, in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom ye shine as lights in the world. Now, why do you need to reorient yourself and refocus onto the Lord? Well, your mind is actually like a radio which has the power to tune into both the physical and the spiritual realm frequencies. Let's say you wanted to listen to some vital news over the radio. A correctly calibrated radio is actually able to isolate and latch onto the specified frequency without any distortions. But what if the radio isn't calibrated properly to the right frequency? Well, in that case, you would be listening to a radio which picks up both distortions along with the desired radio frequency, and that would make it very difficult for you to understand what is being broadcast, and sometimes you might miss out on key messages and lose out on a whole lot of useful stuff. That's how it is when we fail to disconnect from the world and tune back to the spiritual frequency and recalibrate properly to listen to the Lord's word clearly. As a result, a lot of valuable word of knowledge from the Lord might get lost. Yes, because many a time our minds are never out of the world. Even while praising and worshiping, our mind partially is still doing office work, which should have been shut off from the mind the minute you tune into God's frequency. Just imagine how the Lord must feel when He sees that you have come to seek Him with only half a mind and maybe lesser of a heart. Because of these, we will be delayed a lot in our spiritual journey and might not always make it on time, sadly, in our spiritual journey, that is. What's worse is we can lose track of the flow of God's direction because of our foolishness to linger in the worldly frequencies. But thanks be to the Lord who knows our weaknesses and has mercy and grace upon us continually. You need to understand that we are dual beings, physical and spiritual, both. We have a physical body and also we have a spirit which is unaffected by physical death. The trouble is that these two identities are not friends. They are enemies constantly warring against each other. Which side wins is really up to us alone. As we read in Galatians chapter 5 verse 17, for the flesh desires what is contrary to the spirit, and the spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with each other, so that you are not to do whatever you want. So, we have a war within us all the time. While we are in the world, we are continuously switching between the worldly and the spiritual frequencies, considering that we can't tune out the world completely as long as we are in it. This is the right way to live. But then, sometimes, the worldly ways and cares may try to hold on to you strongly so that you remain in the worldly frequency for much more time than is advisable. So, considering that our flesh is inherently weak, let's pay attention now to the Lord's word of caution and warning. Matthew chapter 26, verse 41 reads, "Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." What should we watch and pray about? Actually, everything, both in the spiritual and physical, to align with the will of God. But in this instance, what the Lord Jesus meant is to watch over everything that can induce the flesh to sin. And because the flesh is weak, it will always try to be a stumbling block to the spirit. So pray for the Lord's grace and strength always to uphold you so that the flesh will not make you fall. Even when you examine our daily work life, every once in a while we get a huge workload which we have to deliver in time, because of which obviously our minds have to remain in the worldly realm for more time. And once the work is done, it's likely that we could get mentally and maybe even physically exhausted, right? The trouble is that you might not feel like switching back to your spiritual radio station after that. Your mind convinces you that you're too fatigued mentally and physically, and it's all right to skip tuning to the Lord once in a blue moon. Question is, can you trust your mind over such a decision? Because if such a scenario repeats, and it's very likely that such scenarios would keep repeating, what's to prevent your mind and heart from using the same trick to keep you away from the Lord? You see, it's a classic trick played by the flesh on you. You see, the physical self is always at war with the spiritual self, and given the right conditions, it will conspire to beat down your spiritual self. If you give in a few times by choosing to ignore the Spirit's call and remain plugged in only to worldly frequencies repeatedly, then you might find yourself in a slow descent or even a free fall into worldliness. And this is one of the prime reasons why Christ repeated this command to sum up how we ought to direct our life on earth, and all the true followers of the way of Christ will be distinguished by observing or obeying this command. Luke chapter 21, verse 36, the famous admonition of Christ. "Watch ye therefore, and pray always, that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man." You see, whether you will be able to stand before the Lord Jesus in all His glory when He returns is tied to this one word of warning from the Lord Jesus Himself. All glory to the Emmanuel. Blessed be, blessed be, blessed be.